Good morning, everybody, as we continue our journey with Jesus through Holy Week and reflecting on some of the key events that took place. We are now moving into early Friday morning, where Jesus has been arrested, and first he was taken to Annas, the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the leader of the Sanhedrin. Then he was taken to the Sanhedrin, then to Pilate, then to King Herod, then back to Pilate. And in all this activity, it's interesting to note that Pilate on 4 separate occasions declared that Jesus was innocent of all crimes, even washing his hands at the last one to absolve him from guilt when he finally handed them over to the soldiers to be crucified. And like yesterday, there's many events we can reflect upon. Yesterday we reflected on the divine nature of Jesus, and I touched on that spiritual horror he was about to experience, but remained faithful and obedient to his Father, who he called Abba, which means Daddy. So today, Good Friday, the day of Jesus' crucifixion, it is a day not to forget also Jesus' other side, his human nature, and the physical abuse, the humiliation and degradation, and it's often known as Jesus' passion or sufferings. As I mentioned in my earlier reflection, the cross is at the heart of the gospel, and the physical suffering identified Jesus as the true Messiah. Jesus mentioned this about himself on many occasions, which is why in Matthew's gospel he widely accepted that Jesus was a fulfillment of Old Testament prophecies, and that's why he referred to a lot of them, because his gospel was mainly written for a Jewish audience. And so Matthew drew on the attention of the passion story of Jesus by highlighting some key verses of prophecy. And he went on, he said things like this: was Jesus deserted and betrayed by his friends? Yes. It was the fulfillment of Psalm 41:9. Even my close friends whom I trusted, he who shared my bread, has lifted his heel against me. Was Jesus painfully oppressed and repudiated? Yes. This is in Isaiah 53:3. He was despised and rejected by man, a man of sorrows and familiar with suffering. Did Jesus maintain a dignified silence before his judges? The answer again is yes. This is Isaiah 53:7. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before the shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. Was Jesus flogged, punched, slapped, and spat upon? Yes. This is Isaiah 56. I offered my back to those who beat me, my cheeks to those who pulled out my beard. I did not hide my face from mocking and spitting. These were the signs of the true Messiah, the signs of the suffering servant of the Lord. And it gets us to think about this. Has anybody ever claimed to be the Messiah and gone through all this suffering? Because this is the fulfillment of prophecy concerning the Messiah by one of the greatest Old Testament prophets, Isaiah, a person set aside to deliver the message of God. I think it quite right to reflect on both Jesus' physical passion and spiritual horror or dread. History has shown, and still is showing today, that suffering identifies the Messianic community. Matthew goes on in his gospel to declare persecution to be necessary, characteristics of the Messianic followers. In a book by Paul Marshall called That Their Blood Cries Out, he says there are usually between 200 and 250 million Christians being persecuted for their faith today, and around 400 million living under serious restrictions or religious liberty. Today, the day of Jesus' passion, it is appropriate to reflect on this, what Jesus went through for us, to never forget this, to thank Jesus continually, and to continually pray for those persecuted for suffering. For suffering was the badge that the Messiah had to wear, and a badge that we have to wear until the day we are reunited with him. As I said yesterday, how should we respond to Jesus? I will leave it to you, and pray and reflect on all the things I have highlighted this week. I also feel we have reached the right time in Holy Week for me to end these reflections. I said I would do Saturday and Sunday, but following Jackie's reflections on the hour of the cross this afternoon, I feel until our live stream service Sunday morning, we should retreat into our individual space to pray and reflect and ask the Holy Spirit to put something new on our hearts. I have really enjoyed putting these 9 reflections together. I hope you have found them helpful in your own personal faith journey through the Holy Week. So before I sign off, I just want to read you something that Mike Godfrey, our previous vicar, sent me through the post as reflections for this week, and I think it summarises a lot of the things I've been saying as well. It's reflections from The Glories of God by Milton Vincent, and it's a little verse entitled God Works on My Behalf, which puts everything about Holy Week and Jesus' ministry together. And I must apologise for the glasses because the writing is that small I can't see them, so if you just bear with me. And it is called God's Work on My Behalf. However, what I could not do, God did, and in doing it, He did it all, sending His own Son into the world to die on the cross for my sins, thereby showing me unfathomable love. God loved me so much that He was willing to suffer the loss of His Son, and even more amazingly, He was willing to allow His Son to suffer the loss of Him at the cross. Jesus loved me so much that He was willing to lay down His life for me. No one could ever love me more or better than Jesus. On the 3rd day after Jesus' death, God raised Him from the dead, thereby announcing that His death was completely sufficient to atone for every sin that I have ever or will commit throughout my lifetime. God then exalted Christ to His own right hand, where Christ now reigns from on high, granting salvation and forgiveness to all who call on Him by faith. Let us continue to call upon Him. Let us continue to worship Him. Let us continue to love and adore Him. And so for the final time, I will sign off and say God bless, and please, please, please keep safe.